Hey everybody, welcome to RotoCurve Live for Week 9, as always, presented by the great Rosters.com. If you haven't signed up yet for Rosters, please head over there and use promo code CURVE for an instant $20 bonus on your initial deposit. So if you haven't gone over there, check it out. $10 deposit turns into $30. Can't beat that. I'm Josh Kalachi here from RotoCurve.com, as always joined by two of the funniest guys in the world, and now I'm starting to get a little bit perturbed by Jim's wardrobe, as it's the second straight week where I've wanted what he has on, as Adam Pfeiffer and Jim with the beautiful Shamrock hoodie, Jim McCormick from ESPN.com. So what we're going to do, as always, each week here at RotoCurve Live, we're going to give you our thoughts on the NFL week ahead in DFS. We're going to give you guys that we like, guys that we don't like, and guys who we're going to be building our lineups around. So with that being said, let's jump right into it for quarterbacks. I want to hear Jim talk first, because every time his face pops up, I just keep staring at that hoodie. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, it's a Mickey Ward hoodie from a company called Nomos NYC. They don't really make many clothes anymore, but they have some stuff they're still getting rid of. It's a good brand. But no, I like Drew Brees. I know there's this idea that outside of the Superdome we should fade Brees. I know Adam was on him when he was in Arrowhead not too long ago, and he ended up putting up numbers because that's a soft secondary. Well, this is about as easy as a matchup gets for an opposing offense is, San Francisco. Not only are Chip Kelly's again playing uncomplimentary football to his defense. I think they're 31st in time of possession, which obviously means that their defense is on the field the whole time. Even if they're coming out of a bye, I still like the fact that if we remove that first week, right, it seems like each first week the Niners play well. Last year it was against the Vikings. This year against the Rams. So from week 2 on, the 49ers have allowed 2.69 points per drive. That means almost a field goal per drive. That's the most in football. That's more than the Saints. It's more than the Browns, more than the Falcons. They've also allowed a touchdown on 32% of opposing drives. League average is 21%. So this means that you're talking about they're a third more generous per drive on touchdowns than any other team in football, or at least above the average. So, you're talking about a really sweet setup. That the over-under is 52, I think, at this point. So, I think everything points towards this being a shootout, and obviously that means Brees getting, I think 302 is the floor. And of his kind of peers, I'm sure Rodgers and stuff like that, you save some money from Rodgers is the idea. I like Rodgers as well, but, you save some cash from him. And also, the Saints protect Brees really well. I think he has the lowest sack rate in the NFL, whereas, Rodgers is up there in the top 6 in sack rate. So it's just a good situation all around.
Yeah, it's a good point. And Brees is one of the guys that I like to look at each and every week at quarterback, simply because of that volume. And as Jim said, with that volume increasing against a team like San Francisco, who their defense is going to be on the field the whole time, it just makes for a great play. Adam, what do you think? Do you have any other top quarterbacks you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I think Brees is really interesting because, I don't know, I feel myself playing Brees over Rodgers this week just because of the savings. But, if you're not looking to spend all the way up at quarterback this week, I mean, it's not the greatest week for quarterback in all honesty. But, if you want to play Rodgers, I think Rodgers is more than fine if you want to spend up. We look at this offense right now for Green Bay, and the way they're running the football is by throwing short. I mean, and that's all they're doing, because Rodgers has a career high 39 pass attempts per game, but he has a career low 6.3 yards per attempt. So they're just dinking and dunking all over the field. So with the way the Packers running back situation is shaping out right now, Rodgers has a really high touchdown floor because when they get inside the 10, they're calling pass over 60% of the time. And this is a Colts defense that, 25th in yards per pass attempt, 22nd in yards per completion, potentially no Vontae Davis, high-scoring game. So I'm fine with Rodgers. And then kind of a mid-tier guy I think is going to go kind of sneaky is Philip Rivers. Obviously, Rivers didn't have a good game last week, but that was against Denver. Looking at ESPN stats and info, they pressured him 31 of 51 dropbacks. He just had no chance. Tennessee, I know blitzes a lot, but they're not going to generate pressure like that. And I don't know, Melvin Gordon, I don't see Tennessee has kind of been a team that funnels towards the pass. Teams are averaging 37 pass attempts per game against Tennessee this season, 23rd in the NFL. And you're going to have to attack them through the air. I like Rivers' price tag. I like him with Tyrell Williams. They're both cheap. And the Titans have allowed the most 20-yard passing plays in the NFL this season at 33. They're bottom 12 in passing yards allowed per game. So, I like Rivers, especially because we know Melvin Gordon's not the most efficient running back, and he could easily, run in or fall in for a couple touchdowns. But if he doesn't, I mean, Rivers has some strong touchdown upside here every single week because the Chargers have led the NFL in plays from inside the red zone all season long. So they've been getting down there every game. So I don't see it changing this week against Tennessee at home.
Adam mentioned Drew Brees as well. Adam mentioned Aaron Rodgers. Jim talked about Brees. Of course, Phillip Rivers. But another guy here, I think, in that top tier that's worth playing is Andrew Luck. The way I look at Luck every single week is the way I look at a lot of things in DFS is just all volume. That's exactly what makes Luck so attractive. Over 40 pass attempts per game in the last 2 seasons combined. He's facing Green Bay, who was basically without their entire secondary, especially your cornerback.
Al Harris is coming back to play corner for them.
Yep, all 791 years old of Harris, and he has what, 3-4 feet worth of dreads by now?
Probably.
So yeah, with Al Harris playing quarterback basically for the Packers, Andrew Luck is one of these guys that just has completely game script proof. And what I mean by that is, no matter what, he's going to be throwing because it's rare, and I mean rare in his career, where the Indianapolis Colts go up by more than 2 scores. And even if that happens, I don't think there's going to be a chance for them to run the ball with Frank Gore against a stout Green Bay front seven. So with the game flow going his direction, with how banged up that secondary is for Green Bay and the volume coming, all that added with the fact that both of his weapons should be healthy this week in T.Y. Hilton and Dante Moncrief. So for me, if I'm spending up a quarterback, I'm going to spend all the way up and get Andrew Luck.
But you're not – the thing is, you're not even really spending up. He's 67.
True, he's below 8K.
Like that's
– plus 7K, yeah.
I like that price a lot. And – yeah, like they're never going to be ahead in games. They're right there with Jacksonville and Miami in terms of trail rate this season. They're always behind. So, yeah, Luck's gonna be a guy I'm looking at. I like Luck every week, dude. Like I really do.
The rushing floor too is something to talk about. Just I know you mentioned it, but just the idea that both him and Rodgers, ironically, both ran for 60 last week, which is both career high. But Luck was under pressure, I think the 3rd highest time in his career last week. So that's one thing that's not ideal. But at the same time, he's good in the move. It's going to flush him out. They're both good in the move. I think Rodgers is 2nd in the league in touchdowns outside the pocket. So I think both of these guys are going to be under pressure a little bit. But I agree, both are going to pass the ball 40-plus times.
I didn't even realize this, but if you look at his game log, Andrew Luck's rushing attempts the last couple games, 9, 5, 7, 5, 4. That's like more than Tyrod. Like Tyrod's like a 4 or 5 kind of guy per game. That's a lot.
It is.
So.
Well, Luck came in as the same exact, or in most situations at the combine with Cam Newton in terms of speed, agility, things of that nature. So he can run.
Yeah, broad jump, like more. It's crazy. He's an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw that the first time I saw him play. It was at Stanford when he threw that interception and actually looked like one of the best safeties in college football. Ended up crushing that guy. So we know that guy's an athlete. But talking about other athletes at quarterback, Jim, I know you have 2 that are very intriguing this week.
Yeah, I mean, I like 2 guys that are obviously, on the athletic scale. Both guys who make their bones a little bit running. Dak Prescott, I mean, this guy's going to be chalky. I'm going to assume going in. As a heavy favorite in a game with a nice point total against Cleveland. I talked about how generous San Francisco is. Well, Cleveland's 2nd most in all those rates in terms of touchdowns per drive and points per drive. The 2 touchdown pace continues. It's just really easy to score on this team. And the thing is, the rushing floor is there for Dak too. We're seeing designed runs. It's not just scrambling. And I think one thing is last week there wasn't as much efficiency. We saw kind of his completion rate go down. But here's the thing. It's his highest average depth of target of his career so far last week. Obviously, the sample is only this season for his career, but I think it's a good trend to be going more and more vertical. He missed a couple shots with Dez. There was that one in the end zone. It's like a 29-yard attempt. But he was on point. There was that perfect parabola he threw down the line. You even saw Tony Romo. They cut to him, and he said it was a dime, and it was. So I think there's really a lot of upside here. And also, more importantly, at that price point, there's a really strong floor. It's kind of what we like to get out of Russell Wilson is kind of what we're getting from Dak. It's kind of blasphemous to compare these guys. But what I mean by that is the potential for 50 yards rushing and also this kind of safe passing floor. And it's efficient like how Russell was in terms of at his best, in terms of 8+ yards per attempt kind of stuff. So everything's there for you to get your day out. And for some reason, the price is still modest. I think it's just kind of I don't know what it is. It's the looming threat of a breakdown for this rookie, but at 6,100 on DraftKings, he's still reasonable on FanDuel, but particularly on DraftKings, I love his pricing in the middle tier there. So he's a guy I really like. And then I'll just finish up my quarterbacks. Another guy is Colin Kaepernick. The Niners have run, I think, 128 zone reads this year. The next closest team is the Bills and the Seahawks with 44 zone reads. I mean, that's a humongous gap, and that's where Colin Kaepernick does most of his damage. As Eagles fans, Josh and I used to think about the idea if you could ever get Chip Kelly and Cap together. Well, it's happened, and it hasn't been so exciting, but he's averaging 17 fantasy points. Like Tyrod, he can throw for 160 and a touchdown, and you still look up and he has 18, 19 fantasy points.
Except Tyrod's price goes down after he plays well.
Yeah, I don't know how.
Minimum salary.
Yeah, Tyrod's market is incredible. If somebody either hates or loves,
somebody hates Buffalo,
Yeah, I mean, so the point is, it's a 52-point over/under. New Orleans is also terrible. I mean, this could be a shootout, and just the fact that he could run for 80 and throw for 150, that alone gets you to your floor. So.
Yeah, I think the Niners win this game, by the way. But he hasn't even topped 200 passing yards yet, and he's finished as quarterback 14 and quarterback 16. So imagine if he gets the passing game going, which is more than possible against the Saints. So yeah, I like Kaepernick, and I talk with Jim about this all the time. But teams that blitz, the Saints blitz a lot.
They do.
Not saying I know Jim talks about this all the time. They blitz a lot because they can't generate pressure otherwise. But still, he
can't get pressure.
Yeah. So he could step up in the pocket, and the zone read's going to be like Jim said, as an awesome stat. And then on Prescott, he's had 18 DraftKings points in every game outside of Week 1, and then he gets to go against Cleveland, who gives pretty much the highest floor to opposing quarterbacks in the NFL. So yeah, they're both going to be really high on my list this week too.
You mentioned with Kaepernick, one of the things about all those zone reads on first and goal. Adam and I talked about Cap a little bit, and I discussed how I wasn't sure if I wanted to rely on that run, but given all the volume that's coming, you can rely on that. Like you said, 122 zone reads. Cap is going to be facing.
And Gabbert led the league in quarterback runs
exactly
beforehand. So
so I do think
something they're going to do.
Right. That's part of their game plan.
Yeah,
exactly. How about a quarterback here that I think is going to go way under-owned? Adam knows who I'm going to mention. Eli Manning against the Philadelphia Eagles. The way that he's priced makes him incredibly low-owned. Right now on the Thursday to Monday Fantasy Aces GPPs, he's at 2% right now against the Eagles. The way I look at this, the guy's 2% owned against Nolan Carroll, Leotis McKelvin. I know the safeties are good. Malcolm Jenkins is good. Rodney McLeod has been very good. But the thing is with Nolan Carroll is he just flat out gets beat a lot. We'll talk about his number one receiver in Odell Beckham later. But Eli Manning is one of these guys that has a chance to go for 2 or 3 touchdowns. We know the Giants line up in 3 wide receiver sets for a majority of their snaps, and overwhelming majority, over 90% for the first few weeks. And Eli at home has been a better fantasy quarterback than he has on the road. So far this year, he's averaging 21.5 fantasy points per game at home, which is 5 or 6 more than he was on the road. So the way I'm looking at this game is, with the Eli Manning throwing to some guys that can definitely get open against these corners. We think Odell's going to do well. We think Sterling Shepard's going to do well. What about the guy throwing in the ball? So that's why I approached that. And considering he's $100 more than Colin Kaepernick, who's going to be highly owned in cash, a lot of people use their cash lineups in tournaments, as we always recommend. So that means Kaepernick's going to be highly owned, at least relatively, given his price in tournaments, which is exactly why I want to use a guy like Eli Manning, who has a great matchup in terms of the opposing cornerbacks, and he has some elite guys to throw to. So, Adam, what do you think about the Eli play?
Yeah, he's a tournament guy. I feel like Eli's either going to get you 189 and 0 with 2 picks, or 403. That's kind of where he is. He's you look at his game log, he's either giving you 3 touchdowns or he's giving you 1 or 0. There's been a couple instances for both those cases. So, it's a cheap guy who is throwing to one of the best receivers in the NFL against some bad corners. So there's some obvious upside there, and he's at home. I'm waiting for the Eagles secondary to kind of implode. Maybe it won't happen because the other pieces around them are playing well. That kind of benefits, but I don't hate it. You kind of put me on him a little more than I was, for sure. Definitely not my favorite guy, but I always throw Odell Beckham in tournaments every week, so, I mean, why not throw Eli in one with him?
Exactly. Now, Jim, What do you think about Eli against our Birds? Is it something that you're thinking from an unbiased perspective? Because I know personally, for this reason, I'd like the 189 and no touchdowns. But from a fantasy perspective, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the contrarian angle of it is nice. I think it's not even just recency bias. It's a whole season of just him. It's just flop, right? They're not playing well. But, I mean, you got to think – we've seen this before from Eli. At some point, there's got to be a positive correction. He's throwing the ball so much, and his TD rate is so low, it's almost like it has to come. You know, the idea that Odell isn't 100%, at least that's what he's vocally saying, I think that actually helps what you're saying in terms of ownership. You know, like people are going to be fading this passing game entirely. And like Adam said, at some point the dam is going to break with these outside corners. You know, I mean, Rodney McLeod's been great. You know, Malcolm Jenkins continues to be special, but you're going to get to Jalen Mills. You're going to get to these guys on the outside. You are. And if he gets any one-on-ones, I just think it's going to get – you're going to see it happen eventually. I don't know if this is the week, but, you know –
we talked about this on First and Goal. It's coming because the receivers are playing the next couple weeks are just –
And you're not going to – yeah, you're not going to – I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that's why when we say GPP or tournament guys, what I mean is I don't know what's going to happen, but I also think there's a high ceiling. So it's just it's a wider outcome spectrum is what really we have to say, you know, but there is a high point of that outcome spectrum. I'm not personally on Eli this week, but at the same time, I would not be surprised if we see a shootout emerge here, and that doesn't bode well for the Eagles.
No.
Absolutely. Let's recap quarterbacks real quick before we move on to the plethora of running backs this week. Eli Manning, I just mentioned, is a low-owned option, just 2% right now. Adam and Jim mentioned Drew Brees. We also all like Aaron Rodgers, of course, like everybody else does. And Jim mentioned two athletic quarterbacks in Dak Prescott against the Browns and Colin Kaepernick against the Saints. You want a guy in the mid-tier? I know Adam mentioned Phillip Rivers as well. It was always an intriguing play because of that volume. Let's move on to running backs here, and let's just get it out of the way, guys. Ezekiel Elliott. Vegas loves him. Models love him. Projections love him. People who watch football love him. I mean, it's one of those weeks where it's almost a free square. The only reason why it's not, he's very expensive. So take it away, Jim. What do you think about Zeke?
I mean, look, he's got 5 games in a row with over 140 yards from scrimmage. The last time we saw somebody do that was Chris Johnson in 2009, 2010. He did it 11 times. It's quite a long time ago. That's 5 or 6 years ago, right? So
I was a baby.
He literally was just getting off breastfeeding. So, like, no, but seriously, it's just a great situation. I understand that he's the chalk. I understand that everybody knows it, but that's okay. You know, at the same time, look, he's expensive, but I always do this. We have to compare it to the wide receiver market. I know you have to fill 3 versus 2, so it's going to expand the cost spectrum. But you have a guy like Jordy Nelson is priced almost exactly the same as Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, I understand that we can price in 10 targets for Jordy, and Jordy does well in those situations. Who doesn't? But I don't know. I mean, there's really no fade angle here for me. Watch this be the week he doesn't. But, you know, everything's there. You know, volume, cost certainty. You know, it's Le'Veon Bell, but with a better offensive line.
Yeah,
that's the scary part, really. I mean, if you think about Le'Veon Bell behind a great offensive line, you think about one of the top performances each and every week. And honestly, that's what you're getting from Zeke. The scary part is you know this guy's going to get better. It's just I know he's been one of the better backs ever to come out of college as a rookie, but he's still learning some few things. I don't necessarily think that he's ready for what you see 6 or 7 carries in a drive. You see him come out in the red zone. That's going to change at some point. He's going to get those extra 3-4 carries when he gets even better shape. So this guy is just going to be a fantastic back for quite a long time. And unfortunately, this week for the Browns, he might get 203 touchdowns at halftime. Little Larry Johnson, Penn State action.
Have one of those. Yeah, he's going to have one of those Priest Holmes games one of these days.
Yeah, and it's obviously a great spot. Like the Dallas offense is suddenly they're so easy to project. They have a blueprint every single week, and we know what it is. You know, they're going to hand the ball to Zeke. They're going to, you know, take some shots with Dez now that he's healthy, and they're going to keep their defense off the field. And when they're on the field, they're going to be literally their defense is going to be the definition of average. You know, they're going to bend but don't break. But Zeke, yeah, the Browns are allowing 30.2 rushes per game this season, 3rd highest number in the league. Dallas is the most run heavy team in the league at 50.3%. They're calling runs. So, in a potential, you know, very positive game script for Zeke. 150 and 2, very, very possible. 200 might be impossible. It's just when you watch them run, I mean, every other run is a first down for Zeke. He leads the league in first down runs with 43, and the Cleveland's 29th in rushing first downs allowed. So there's going to be a lot of Zeke Elliott in this game.
Yeah, without a question. And that's why I think that in PPR formats, at least, Le'Veon Bell is a very interesting pivot, or if you want to use both with cheap guys at other positions. The guy right now is just 12% owned, which is far too low in PPR formats. Now, the reason why I mentioned in PPR is because on FanDuel, it's a half point, which isn't that much of a difference. When you talk about 5, 6, 7 catches, those points add up. Also on FanDuel, Ezekiel Elliott is 9,200, which is a lot for tournaments. You're going to need a ton of points. So a pivot down to Bell, a $500 difference could make a difference between getting a lower tier receiver and a mid tier receiver. But back to Bell, the guy has 37 targets and 30 catches in 4 games. That's excellent for a top tier receiver. This guy gets to run the ball as well. Doesn't have a touchdown yet. We know that's going to correct itself. He doesn't have a great matchup against the Ravens, who have been one of the better defenses in the league against running backs. But the guy's still averaging 5 yards per carry. All those catches are there. You know the floor is there. It's the highest floor of basically anybody in the NFL. And the ceiling's still there as well. He hasn't scored a touchdown, but he has well over 21 or 22 DraftKings points basically every week. So for me, I think Le'Veon Bell makes for a great pivot if by some chance Ezekiel Elliott doesn't have a massive game. But that's more of a game theory play to me.
Yeah, I love Le'Veon. Since week 4, he's handling 78% of the running back carries, and the dude still looks as good as ever. 3.7 yards after contact on about 70 rushing attempts this season. 7.5 catches a game. Like, that's unheard of for a running back. They obviously line him up out wide in the slot, whatever. So, like, similar to like the Jets game, if he can't get it going on the ground, he's going to find some way to get it going. Kind of like we saw with David Johnson last week against Carolina. So he's always in play. He's incredible.
Now, Adam, you mentioned a guy earlier this week. I know we talked about him throughout the week, and Carlos Hyde. Do you just want to touch on him real quick in case by some chance he does play?
Yeah, so like he's been quote unquote practicing, but he's been non-contact, and now it doesn't even. It's apparently he has a sprain in the AC joint, which is like usually a multi-week injury. So kind of off him a little bit now. But if he were to play and would be good to go and full go, I mean, obviously be a great spot. The Niners call runs 63% of the time inside the 10-yard line. Saints have allowed 12 rushing touchdowns this season. So it would have been a good spot, but I don't know. I don't know if he can go there now. It doesn't look like he's 100%, and he might not even play. So,
yeah, it's one of those situations where if he doesn't play, it's not like there is a clear-cut backup.
It's going to be a committee with DeJuan Harris and Davis and Sean Jerome.
Exactly. Now, Jim, we're looking at the middle tier here for backs. There was a cheap guy last week everybody used. Are you still going to use him this week?
Yeah, I mean, look, the inflation on Booker is huge. Devontae Booker was 3,900 last week on DraftKings. Now he's 64, I believe. You know, that's obviously a dramatic spike, but I still don't even think it's completely commensurate with his workload. You know, like we just talked about 2 guys in Elliott and Bell who are just had these monster workloads, the David Johnsons of the world. I mean, that's what this guy's been getting the last 2 weeks. He's 6.5 red zone touches per game in the last 2 games. Last week, he had 76% of the Denver rushing attempts, 95% of their rushing yards, 17.8% of their targets. So he's busy on every drive in every sense of their offense. You know, they're not going to be bringing Bibbs in to take over any meaningful carries. I know he lost a red zone touch, a goal line touch at Juwan Thompson, but I don't think that's really a factor. I think that was almost like kind of a little game script kind of.
He was in the game too. It was just they lined up Thompson at fullback.
I really don't think that's a sign of usage or anything. No. I don't think that's a trend. I think it's a single play. We shouldn't extrapolate much from that.
Yeah.
My thing is he's also going to have he's going to have his game. He's going to have his Doug Martin 200-yard multi-touchdown game at one point. And it might just happen against a team who's given up the most yards per carry in the AFC.
Didn't Doug Martin do his game against the Raiders too?
Exactly. The Raiders are giving up 4.86 yards per carry. It's the most in the AFC. They're giving up almost 3 yards before contact, which means as good as Khalil Mack is starting to warm up and get pressure, you know, they're not penetrating the actual backfield in terms of depth. So everything's there. I don't know why you wouldn't want to be on him. I know the price might bump people off, but I invite that.
Yeah, I like that too, Jim. I was talking about that with Josh on the first and goal. Like now that he's all the way up to 6,400, people are going to be off him despite being, in a better matchup than he was last week. And he played 54 of 65 snaps, and he left the game with a shoulder injury. So if he didn't suffer the little minor shoulder injury, he probably would have played close to 90, 95% of the snaps. So,
Right.
um,
Usage.
yeah. So yeah, I'm on him again. The Raiders are allowing 6.5 yards per play, the most in the NFL. So a lot of opportunity for Booker here.
Yeah, I'm on Booker as well. And the way I look at him is, despite the price jump of 2,700, as Jim said, I don't think that's fully appreciated yet. I agree, because the one thing with him is, would people use C.J. Anderson if you knew he was the bell cow back with nobody behind him for 6,400? Yes. Right. And it can be argued that Devontae Booker has actually been more efficient so far. So that's the way I approach that.
It's like Melvin Gordon all over again, meaning like we saw this fractured San Diego backfield that started to happen in Denver, and now it's all consolidated by one guy.
Exactly. You don't get guys in NFL DFS or in the NFL really anymore that are going to be the bell cow backs, the lead guys. So it's worth paying up for them, and you're really not paying for too much. When you think about it, as Jim always mentions with the difference between receivers and running backs, Terrell Pryor 6,100, Devontae Booker 6,400. For me, it's Booker every time if you have to decide in the flex. Now, Adam, I know you have some backs we actually all agree on, but is there any other backs you wanted to mention before I kind of dive into one?
I guess we should probably talk about the Saints running backs, right?
Yeah, give it a shot, because I love one of them in particular.
Yeah, so Mark Ingram fumbled again last week, and second straight fumble, and he got benched, played a career low 6 snaps or 8 snaps. And then Hightower came in and had 26 carries for 100 yards. Sean Payton said he earned more work. And, of course, now we get a potential split against the Niners, who've allowed 6 consecutive 100-yard rushing games. They've allowed 170 rushing yards or more in 4 straight games, I think. They're just getting absolutely gashed on the ground. So 4,800 for Ingram, 4K for Hightower on DraftKings. I'd much rather play Hightower, especially because I think he's going to get the goal line and short yard stuff anyway, even if Ingram didn't fumble. Like, they just weren't giving him – he wasn't playing in that role anyway. I've talked about this a lot, but Eli Manning has more carries inside the 5-yard line than Mark Ingram this season. So I haven't been giving him the ball. They've been giving it to John Kuhn. Hightower, even Kobe Fleener is getting rushing touchdowns. So I'm not playing Mark Ingram. And, think about it. If he fumbles by some off chance, he fumbles again, he's done. Like, your day's over. He's not going back in the game. So I think Hightower, we saw at the end of last year, he was actually, I think, the last 4 weeks of 2015, he was running back 2 in fantasy behind David Johnson. So, in this offense, Tim Hightower can be at 4K. He could crush value if he gets 15 to 20 carries against the Niners, who are just so bad against the run. So, I'm not playing Ingram. Maybe if we're rolling out a lot of lineups, you want to roll him out there in case it was kind of just motivation for him to get going, and then he just comes out and dominates. But I think you got to look at Hightower as the preferred play right now.
Yeah, I agree with you there. He's actually one of my favorite plays of all this week, because I just don't
say of all time.
Basically, one of my favorite plays of all time. I mean, if Ingram fumbles, he's one of my favorite plays of all time. But the way I look at it is I don't understand why Sean Payton would see as effective as Hightower would be and just try to risk it with Ingram. So that's why I think that Hightower will be the lead back for the Saints this week. But one guy I like is a little bit cheaper, is a little bit more contrarian. This is a DraftKings or rosters full PPR play only, and that's Theo Riddick against the Minnesota Vikings. Guy's 8% owned right now, and I think that will go up a little bit depending if he's officially a full go. He has been practicing. He's questionable, but he should play. You guys have heard me talk a lot about how I like pass-catching backs against good pass-rushing teams. That's exactly what the Vikings do. They get pass rushing from the linebackers when they blitz. They can generate pass rush from the 4-man rush as well. So I really like Theo Riddick to catch a bunch of balls out of the backfield. And also, the way I look at this game, Xavier Rhodes is going to be on Marvin Jones, so that can kind of take him out of DFS usage and probably main usage for the Lions. So Golden Tate, Theo Riddick are going to be the guys getting most of the bulk of the volume of the touches. So that's why I think that Riddick makes an excellent play. There's a guy we haven't touched on yet. He's going to be the chalk, but for the reason that I think everybody needs to use him. So, Jim, why don't you talk about Mr. Charkandrick West?
Yeah, he's quite chalky this week. Chalky West is kind of the thing. It's
Chalky West is Chalky. Is that
Chalky West? Just like was it Chalky White in Boardwalk? So yeah, I mean the idea here is pretty obvious, right? He's going to assume. I mean, Ware didn't practice again today. He's not going to play, right? I mean, you're not going to clear a guy over the weekend for a concussion. There's a doctor online, I forget his exact name, Dr. Chow. He was the San Diego Chargers team doctor for over a decade. He had a piece of data that said, like, over the last 2 years, players with concussion, over 55% now miss the next week. So it's obviously just a more sensitive league to that. I mean, obviously in the wake of League of Denial, all those things. So West is going to be the guy. I mean, they hired they signed Sankey, who is obviously – Adam's boy.
He's going to eat.
Let's be honest. He's going to need real religion to get in there. We're going to say that West is going to be the guy in an offense that I think they target their back 7 times a game, which is healthy. Obviously, West, I think, Ware was 4th in receiving yards per game. I mean, it was obviously fueled by that one humongous catch he had. Was it like a 65-yard catch earlier this year? But Ware was averaging 18 yards per reception. I'm not saying that West replicates that, but as an Eagles fan, we can remember all the bubble screens that they did with Westbrook, and even going back to Deuce Staley. I mean, it's a successful, game script, a game plan that they can deploy. They're going to do it again. The Jaguars have given up the 3rd most points per drive since week 2. It's not a very effective defense. We just saw the Tennessee, backfield, although they're different than West. Move all over the place on this Jacksonville defense. The line for the Jacksonville Jaguars isn't very good. You got that one rookie, the kid Yannick. He's really talented, but other than that, Malik Jackson's not playing up to his pay grade. So getting to the second level against this team isn't so difficult. Everything's there. I mean, it's really the price, right? More than anything, it's the price versus the touches. I don't think this is a 20-plus touchback, but I think it's a 15 touchback, and that alone, I think, makes him kind of the chalk guy. If he makes you be able to afford paying up for Elliott is kind of the way I look at him.
Yeah, you can have both of them, and you're not spending an enormous amount of money at running back, but you still have that huge return. Right now, Charkandrick West is 39% owned, and that's going to go up even higher because in this Thursday to Monday slate, a lot of people use Devonta Freeman, 43%, Mike Evans, 43%. So I expect Charkandrick West fully to be over 60% owned in cash this weekend. And for a good reason. Like Jim said, you can pair him with Elliott and not spend that much at running back. The volume's going to be there. The matchup's there. And like Jim said, this guy's very talented with the ball in his hands. So a few screens from Nick Foles, which he likes to do, and makes for a very interesting play regardless of cash or GPP. I don't think it's one of those situations where you have to fade him in tournaments because of the ownership, because he's probably one of the highest ceilings and floors given the price at that situation. Adam, is there any other backs you wanted to touch on, or are we good to move to wide receiver?
I think we're good. We talked about Zeke and the couple cheap guys that are going to be talked about. Let's do receivers.
I'm with it. Yeah, Zeke, Carlos Hyde, if he ever played, but unfortunately it doesn't look like it's going to be the thing.
What about
Le'Veon Bell?
That's a good call. Sproles is a good call.
Oh, yes. We definitely have to talk about him. Definitely. Jim, I'll just take that because I know I like him as well.
Oh no, yeah. I just like the price, and I like how coaches lie all the time. I mean, Peterson's saying that
he said Matthews is the lead guy.
That's probably because I don't know why.
Did you guys see that on Thursday? One of the beat reporters came out and said Ryan Matthews was limited today with a tooth injury.
I mean,
that was funny.
Very Matthews of him. I mean, look, Ryan Matthews, I do think deserves more work. That doesn't mean he's going to get more work. And in a game, I think one of the things here is in terms of like if you're going to game plan, the way to beat this Giants team is to get those linebackers in space. Jonathan, that's where they're weakest. Keenan Robinson. That's where you can get these guys turned around. Their safeties are good. Their outside corners are pretty good. Their defensive ends are good. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's a talented defense outside of the middle. They're kind of, they're like a Twinkie defense. I don't know what to say. They're soft in the middle. It's the way to get to them. So I think you're going to see Sproles again. I don't think you see 75% of the snaps again, but I think you see 12-plus touches. And with his wheels, that could still equal you 80 total yards, and any scoring opportunity is gravy.
Yeah, 3,900 is just too cheap. Doug Peterson was like talking him up after the game on Sunday night, like saying, we got to get the ball in this guy's hands. We got to get this ball in this guy's hands. So
he's the only guy on the team that has ever forced a missed tackle this year.
100%.
There's nobody on the Eagles right now that has any evasiveness or elusiveness outside of him. Even all of their guys fall down upon contact.
Yeah, especially when you on a big third down in the fourth quarter, you isolate Trey Burton out wide and throw a back shoulder fade to get a first down, and he just creates zero separation.
Right.
That was great.
I think just to add with Sproles, another thing is with Josh Huff being cut.
Yep.
Those 3 or 4 targets that Huff's going to see on maybe a quick bubble screen, a rocket screen, or even sometimes they like to use Huff on a reverse. Maybe not giving the ball, but just move him in space. I think Sproles could get those looks. And as Adam talked about on 1st and goal, you wanted to use the Eagles defense. You can double dip. Yeah. If Jaron Sproles runs a punt back for a touchdown, which I know it's under a 5% chance of happening, but it's a thing. It's a possibility. It's an extra 6 points. If you double dip with the Eagles defense,
I have an irrational
10 points.
I have an irrational feeling every time Sproles catches a punt that he's going to score, because when I went to the Bills-Eagles game last year, I was so nervous every time we punted. I felt like he was going to run it back every time. It was weird. So, but yeah, he's so cheap, man. He's 39. He's cheaper than Ryan Matthews. So I don't know what kind of sense that makes when Ryan Matthews played 8 snaps last week.
Yeah, I think Sproles is definitely in play. I know Ricky Sanders likes him as well, so it'll be an interesting way to look at that offense, because although Dougie P said Ryan Matthews is a guy, that's not evident. It just hasn't happened lately. I don't think it's going to happen again.
This is off topic, but doesn't Ricky Sanders sound like the name of a character on Ballers? It just does.
Yes,
don't watch that
100%.
No.
All right, let's go. We can move forward.
All right, wide receivers this week. It's going to be interesting because Julio Jones played last night. Mike Evans played last night. Antonio Brown hasn't been the same guy because Big Ben hasn't played, but Big Ben should be back. So it's not like we have the money, as we have for the last 2 weeks, and cap to just spend up for those 3 top receivers. So it's going to be a very interesting week. So, Jim, why don't we start off with you at wide receivers? Who are you looking at right now?
Well, I think it's a natural stack to go with Dak and Dez. It sounds cool, and it could be productive. I mean, like I said, one of the issues early in the season with Dak and Dez was that, for one, the sample was small, but everything was these comebacks, these button hooks, these little short turnaround, kind of get the first down and fall down kind of plays. Whereas now we're seeing them, go downfield. We're seeing over-the-shoulder throws, and it wasn't just that one instance down the sideline in the second quarter. It's over and over we saw it, even into the red zone. They're launching kind of – and they're not fades. They're like legitimate seams. They're really nice post routes. Dez Bryant is going to be the top target in this game. I know they have the Joe Hayden factor. He's not going to get in the way of this guy's contested catch abilities. I just think the ceiling's so high, and the price is still kind of factoring in his downside and factoring in those struggles. He's still hovering around $7,000 on DraftKings. I think it's a good – I'm not even afraid in a tournament to go with a team stack, and just get all these guys in there. But, yeah, Dez is an affordable wide receiver 1 the way I look at it.
Yeah, exactly. 7,400 right now on DraftKings, just 7,800 on FanDuel, which is really very low considering the fact that Antonio Brown is 87 and Odell Beckham is 89 on FanDuel. So while we're talking about Odell, let me just get that out of the way because he is my favorite play in tournaments this week. Odell Beckham, 2% owned. Now, I would play that regardless of who he's facing. If he was facing
what's Harris,
I would play Odell Beckham at 2%. But he's not. He's playing Nolan Carroll, who I think we can all agree is not very good. If he doesn't see Nolan Carroll, he's going to see Jalen Mills or Leotis McKelvin. None of those guys can stop Odell Beckham at all. So 2% against that matchup, that makes it easy anyway. Now, I just want to add in the fact that Eli Manning is 3% owned. So those 2 guys right there, you can get them for a pretty low price given the matchup that they have. I think combining the 2 of them in tournaments is going to be a very, very profitable play at a very low ownership. So be sure to take advantage of that. Now, Adam, I know you talked about in First to Goal how you like Allen Robinson and some other mid-tier guys or upper middle-tier guys, but is there anybody else in that tier wide receiver that you like?
Yeah, so I find myself looking at the mid-tier guys at receiver this week because there's only really 2 or 3 top guys. I mean, you have a handful of players on bye. You had two of the best receivers in fantasy on Thursday night, so they're off the table. Antonio Brown, we don't know if Ben's 100%. He's probably going to play, but it's not a great matchup for Brown. You just talked about Beckham, and then so I kind of find myself going in the mids here, and one of those guys I'm looking at is out of nowhere, really, is after writing about him and what Jim talked about with the Eagles is Jordan Matthews. I kind of like. It's not a guy I usually target a whole lot, but this is a pretty good spot for him. I know his targets have been kind of inconsistent, but the Eagles are going to have a lot of success running the football. And we talked about it, how the Giants are weak in the middle. That's where they struggle. Only 20% of the total yards against the Giants has come on the ground. That's a really low number. And I was talking to Scott Barrett of Pro Football Focus. He points out a lot of the weeks, these numbers for defenses in terms of fantasy points allowed against. The Giants have allowed 17.7 fantasy points per game from the slot, the fourth most in the NFL. And we've seen interior guys have success against them. Tavon Austin went for 10 for 57 and a touchdown. Cobb went for 9, 108. Jameson Crowder 4 for 78 and a touchdown. And Willie Snead went for 5 for 54 and a touchdown. So Matthews is going to see, I would say 8 to 12 targets is a lock for him, especially with the Eagles receiving core looking the way it is. And I think it's interesting. The price is really low on him too. 5,700 is more than fair. Had a lot of catches last week, and then in that same range, I love Dante Moncrief this week. T.Y. Hilton's on 100%. Either way, Moncrief offense. He played 89% of the snaps in his first game back from the shoulder injury. Scored a touchdown. This dude's got a sneaky good touchdown scorer. He scored in 7 of the last 9 full games alongside Andrew Luck. Obviously had a huge start to the season last year in terms of the touchdowns before Luck went down. Green Bay, we talked about the secondary, really banged up. They've allowed the 8th most touchdowns to receivers this season. Don't think Frank Gore and the running game get going here, and 40 pass attempts for Luck is very possible in this game, and I think Moncrief could have a monster game at 5,800. His ownership was actually, I think he was the most highly owned receiver on Fantasy Aces, actually.
Yeah, that's correct. Dante Moncrief Fantasy Aces was the highest.
Minus Thursday night, guys.
Yeah, he didn't play Thursday night. Moncrief's at 24%. Now, that's based on how low his price is, but his price is pretty low everywhere. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Adam, you mentioned how successful Jordan Matthews is in the middle and how that's a great way to target against the New York Giants. Jim, you like another guy that I would say is pretty good in the middle of the field, right?
Yeah, this guy Jarvis Landry, right? He's just like the definition of the slot maven in the NFL right now. The guy who just works these underneath routes. You don't need a high average, depth of target. You have to like the fact that Ajayi doing so well, it doesn't take away from his success. It might even set him up for more success in the sense that Ryan Tannehill was, pressured constantly. I think he had the 6th highest pressure rate previous to the last 2 games when Ajayi started going off. During those 2 games, it's hard to pressure the quarterback when the running back is going Jim Brown on you. So it's a good setup. Not that I buy into the fact that Ajayi is going to repeat that performance, but I do think the volume will be there for him. It helps set up, I think, a little bit more deception, at least for him. You also got to take into the fact, do you remember last year, Landry went off against the Jets, especially in the second game. It was something like 165 yards and 13, receptions. And I think even the first meeting they had, he had I think he was limited in the receiving game, but he had 30 yards rushing or something like that. So he had 70 total yards the first time, 130 the second time. He's over. I think he averaged 117 yards from scrimmage is the idea.
Yeah, 28 total targets.
Yeah, so it's just a sweet setup. I think this is even a more attractive, and it's an eroded pass defense with the Jets. Of course, they've bounced back a little bit from what they were doing before because that was historic, kind of 2014 Eagles type stuff. But it's a really bad secondary. They give up big plays by the bunches, and I just think again we talked about the linebacking core for the Giants. David Harris and Aaron Henderson, because I think Darren Lee is going to be hurt this game.
He's out, yeah.
Yeah, just get to the second level for this team. You can get by them and you can start moving. Even Calvin Pryor isn't a very efficient tackler in the safety department. So, yeah, Landry's just set up. He's going to have the ball in his hand 10 times, whether it's through a combination of receptions and rushes. There's value there.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one of these guys in cash games, especially in full PPR formats. It's just well worth having. I want to mention a cheap guy here, another low-owned guy. Seems to be my forte this week. I'm not going to mention forte. The pun almost came, but it didn't. Corey Coleman, 3% owned right now against the Dallas Cowboys. Just $4,500 on DraftKings. We know that Coleman's going to see the targets. He's facing the Cowboys secondary, who has been pretty good, but Morris Claiborne's out. Barry Church is out, I believe, as well. So this is one of those situations where with Pryor on one side, he's going to command some attention. Corey Coleman on the other side is just 4,500. You know he's going to get the targets from Cody Kessler, who was just announced as the starter. Unfortunately, McCown isn't going to play. I thought that offense was a little bit better with McCown in terms of DFS. But either way, I think Kessler's going to look Coleman's way. Be worried about a guy coming off an injury. But for Corey Coleman, it was a hand injury. He still should be in shape. He was running. The only issue he had was he couldn't catch the ball, which is kind of important for a receiver. So the receiver's hands right now are okay. He should be able to play. He doesn't have to wear a brace or any certain kind of glove. So he should be ready to go. And at 4,500 to 3% owned, I'm more than willing to take a chance because this guy we know can score touchdowns. We saw it happen in college. We saw it happen in week 2. I think it continued this week against a Dallas secondary that's banged up a little bit too much. Now, Jim, I have a question for you. I asked Adam in first and goal a question between 3 receivers he wants to pick. It was between, in the same game, Moncrief, Ty Montgomery, or Devontae Adams. All 3 the same price, all 3 playing the same game, and all 3 actually have a lot of upside. So for you, who are you taking between those 3?
Adams, and the reason is the price is still reasonable. I know they're all priced, similarly. It's also just he serves a pretty important role as kind of a vertical threat. I mean, like whenever they put the safety on top of Jordy, we know that Cobb's not going to be the one that's going to take this role. It's really him. I mean, he's the guy who's going to sneak past, the second level. He's going to get one-on-one looks. Playing against a Colts, depth chart that is already thin and weak at cornerback. So, yeah, it's just a good setup. I think, Adam spoke to this, that they're passing to run. I know the efficiency's down, but look, he's also – it doesn't matter what we think of Adams as a player. Like, he's getting the ball so much. He's getting so much volume that I don't think it's a fluke. I really don't. I don't think it's a fluke at all. I think Rodgers, with his arm strength, loves to go to the outside. He loves to whip the ball outside. He can get to those corners. And I think that's something that we're going to see with Adams again here. It's just I'm basically trusting the pattern, and we're now in week 9. I'm trusting the pattern that Adams is a 20% share of an Aaron Rodgers offense. And like I said, a guy who is second in the league in touchdowns on the run, touchdowns outside the pocket. I kind of like his ability on the broken play factor is also huge.
Yeah, I want to touch on that real quick, Jim, because listen to this. Looking at his game log, he has under 10 DraftKings points in 2 games. One's against Dallas, who had Mo Claiborne, who's been playing very well. And the other one is against Minnesota, who we know their defense is excellent. In these other games, he has 14, 10, 19, and then all of a sudden with the big issues with Eddie Lacy getting hurt, Don Jackson banged up, Ty Montgomery in the backfield. In those games, he has 19, 41, and 19. 30 targets in the last 2 games, 25 catches, which I don't know if 25 for 30 is a sustainable rate, but I think 20 for 30 is, and 10 catches in each game for 2 weeks. I'm paying $7,000 for that. Thing is, with Devontae Adams, he's only $5,900, and he's not going to see Vontae Davis this week. So for me, I'm way in for that play.
Yeah, I think I just saw that Randall Cobb is going to be a game-time decision, Mike McCarthy said. So obviously that'll benefit even more. Yeah, they're all in play, absolutely all in play. Adams has a really high floor right now with the way this offense runs. I think Moncrief is a little more upside, but I like all of them. One guy I want to talk about, one more guy, Kelvin Benjamin. Me and Josh talked about this on first and goal because Josh brought up the size difference between the corners and Kelvin Benjamin. If Tremaine Johnson's out again, who looks like he's going to be a game time decision. It looks like that means Kelvin Benjamin would see Troy Hill. Kelvin Benjamin is listed at 6'5", 242 or 6'5", 245. Troy Hill is listed at about 5'10", 180. That's a huge mismatch, and not only is Troy Hill small compared to Kelvin Benjamin, but he's just been bad this year. He's got like a 39 Pro Football Focus rating out of 100. He's given up 154 yards after contact according to PFF. That's the 3rd worst in the league. 77% of the targets against him have been. So like he's just been getting roasted. So I think Benjamin's going to be a really low-owned guy that has upside if Tremaine Johnson sits one more game.
It's a power forward on a point guard, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, how is he going to tackle
ridiculous.
KB? I just don't. It doesn't make any sense to me physically. Like if he goes low, he might disappear.
He probably won't. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you on KB. You know, he's one of my favorite players, and considering he's that much bigger, he doesn't have to get open. You know what I mean? Like he can. Cam Newton can just throw it anywhere within 5 yards, and he's going to catch it because, like you said, it's Boogie Cousins going against Pepe Sanchez. Just maybe Jim will know who that is. So.
I like it.
So, I just want to touch on one more receiver quickly with that Randall Cobb news. Ty Montgomery. If Randall Cobb doesn't play, we know Don Jackson's bagged up. We saw today that Ty Montgomery basically is the running back. They even made him running back eligibility on Madden, which you know has got to be the lock. That's everything that everybody pays attention to. 20 catches last 2 weeks, 25 targets. He's seen 12 carries as well. So if Cobb is out, Montgomery is 100% a cash game play. He should be in your lineups. But even if Cobb plays, I think with Jordy on the outside, matched up with Vontae Davis, if he's cleared, I think Montgomery is another safe bet for 15 to 20 touches again.
Hey guys, before we go to tight end, if I have to my seasonal lineup, I'm thinking about playing Dorial Green Beckham because the choices are very slim on the waiver wire. What do you think?
He's seeing close to 85% of the snaps, if I remember correctly, last 2 weeks.
Yeah, 9 targets last week, too.
So, I mean, speaking from – he needs to be on the field all the time, I think. I mean –
bonuses for drops, I definitely do
it. there's no one to choose from, man. I'll hit up the waiver wire and see what we got.
Let's recap receivers real quick before we move on to tight ends. We talked about Dez. Everybody loves Dez. It's an excellent play. Adam also mentioned Dante Moncrief. We talked about the Packers backs. Actually running back and receiver, Ty Montgomery. We talked about Devontae Adams as well. Also mentioned Odell, 2% owned, and Corey Coleman at just 3% owned. So tight ends this week. There's a lot to choose from, right, guys? No.
Not really.
Not at all. There is nobody at all.
Yeah, I mean, we got Eifert out. We have Jordan Reed out. We have Gronkowski out. It's just it's a brutal bye week for this position more than any other position, I would think.
Yeah, Greg Olsen basically is the highest priced tight end right now, but he has a tough matchup against LA. And I actually just read Delaney Walker slipped in practice and pulled his groin. So
literally, it's not like I didn't just write him up in the GPP article.
The best tight end basically right now could be Rudolph. Right? Rudolph, and that's it. He might be 80% owned now.
I don't know. On FanDuel, I'm playing with all my lineups because he's so cheap. But Detroit tight ends, it's like Saints against running backs and Niners against running backs. It's just that dream matchup. 8 tight end touchdowns already allowed this season. 19 of the last 24 games they've given up 19 touchdowns at the tight end position. Bradford likes throwing to the tight end, especially for touchdowns. Almost 30% of his career touchdowns have gone to tight ends during his time in St. Louis and Philadelphia and a short time in Minnesota. So, for me, I'm just playing Rudolph here, and if I'm going up, maybe some Kelsey. We saw Nick Foles kind of take more shots down the field, especially towards Kelsey when he was under center for Smith last week, and he's been listed as a starter. So I don't hate that, but it's kind of rough. I mean, I guess Witten's okay, but it doesn't give you a lot of upside. Like, it's not a lot of intriguing guys.
Jim, what do you think? I know you have some guys mentioned here.
I actually have Olsen in there only because I agree. I think the crowd will be off of him because of the Rams number. But really, if you look at the Rams schedule, it's kind of cherry picking the numbers to look at the fact they've been tough against tight ends. I mean, look, TJ McDonald is terrible in coverage. He's a box safety. Their linebackers aren't bad. Ogletree's not bad in coverage, but in general, it's not really a team. If you look at it personnel wise, Mark Barron, they're not really ideally built to cover the tight end. But here's the thing. They've only played one team this year that actually has a tight end of any value. It's Jimmy Graham. And that was week 2 before Graham was even getting integrated in the offense. Since then, it's the Bucs, the Cardinals, the Bills. I mean, no offense to Charles Clay. Ebron was sitting against Detroit. And then, whatever you suspect out of Will Tye over here for the Giants. So they really haven't faced a top tight end yet. I just think this is a situation where they're going to be challenged this week with an actual tight end and a guy who's going to get the ball. He's going to get his 8 targets. And again, if you've been watching these Carolina games, there have been several moments where where Cam has missed him down, in deep. He was in the red zone on like a 40-yard deep ball this last week, and Cam missed him. He was wide open. So I'm just trying to say, how many tight ends are getting the ball 20-plus yards downfield with regularity? It's like Gronk and him. It's just not happening often. So I just think the upside is still in cash, there's no way I'm going Olsen. But in tournaments, if I'm going with these cheaper running backs like West and even like Sproles or something like that, I don't mind at all paying up for Olsen. Just because of the fact that he is so ahead of the crowd in terms of his ceiling, it's not really funny.
Yeah, I was just looking at Olsen, and I'm glad you mentioned that matchup issue because I hadn't dug that deep into it, obviously with everything going on this week. But it's very interesting because last week against the Cardinals, he only had 1 catch on 3 targets. We know how that game ended up, Carolina, and the difference in the score was really evident right away. We know just how good Arizona is. Before that, this is going from week 1. Ready? Catches for Greg Olsen. 7, 5, 6, 6, 9, and 6. His targets have been 8 or more in all but 1 game. That was against the Saints where he caught 6 of 7 targets. He's got over 600 yards, 2 touchdowns. And one thing you mentioned about the Rams, they have that good matchup on paper, but they haven't faced any tight ends yet. You mentioned Mark Barron. The guy was moved from safety because he couldn't cover.
Exactly.
So it's going to give you one of those options. I really like Greg Olsen now. Now that we kind of dug a little bit deeper here, Jim, I'm with you. I don't think I'm going to pay for him in cash because you have to pay for other positions this week.
Right.
But a guy like that in tournaments, he's going to get the ball down the field. It's definitely worth using. Jim, you have any other cheaper tight ends there? Because I know we talked about not using Olsen and higher price. Adam mentioned Rudolph. But anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, my other tight ends would be I did like Barnidge. I'm not as on him now because I just liked his rapport with McCown. But another guy that we can talk about getting a ton of usage is Antonio Gates. I know he still looks like a grandpop out there. He's not even a dad runner at this point. He's more like a great uncle. But here's the thing. He's only catching 50% of his targets too. But here's the thing. He has more targets over the last 3 games than any other tight end in football. And volume alone at the tight end position is valuable. He also is leading the Chargers over the last 5 weeks in red zone targets. So the Hunter Henry narrative, look, Hunter Henry's a really talented player. 1, he's banged up now, and 2, he's pretty much been, in that Ladarius Green role the last 3 weeks, which is kind of this complimentary field stretcher, doesn't get a ton of targets. I think he has half the routes and a third of the targets as Gates over the last 3 games. So, but I think he helps. He helps serve to keep Gates' price down. And I just think the fact that Gates doesn't really have a very high reception floor, it drags down his interest. I don't think the market's too hype on him yet. But the price isn't there. I just think eventually you're going to see a multi-touchdown game out of this guy. Not even that. It's just he's going to get red zone looks. He's going to get targets. The Titans have actually been somewhat susceptible to the position. Their safety core is not very good, and Avery Williamson isn't great in coverage. So you're talking about what have they been giving up the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends, at least on ESPN leagues, which is fairly translatable to these other formats. So, yeah, it's just I think Gates is a guy who I'm paying for in cash because, 1, what's a floor at tight end? There's no such thing right now as a floor at tight end. And 2, I mean, what we really want, tight end is a touchdown or bust position, isn't it? And that's that's kind of what I want, the guy with the best touchdown rate in the history of the league, at least one of them, and that's Antonio Gates.
That's exactly what I wrote down. I wrote Gates up in my bargain article because if I am going down a little bit, I'm probably going to go for Gates at $3K on DraftKings, especially Hunter Henry just came up on RotoWorld. He didn't practice today, so he might not even play, which is even better. But, the Chargers have continued to lead the league in red zone plays this season. So I think Gates at that price, I wrote him up like you're looking for a touchdown at tight end, especially on a week where there's no Gronk, there's no Reed, there's no Eifert. Like, so yeah, I think Gates could get 30 yards, but if he scores a touchdown, you're good, and he can easily score a touchdown in this spot.
Exactly, and in the last 3 weeks, looking at Gates, he has 9, 10, and 6 targets. So you're looking at 25 targets in 3 weeks. 2 of those games are against Denver. That can't be discounted. They are one of the best defenses basically against any position, especially against tight ends with the guys that they have in the middle. I know a lot of people say if you wanted to target them, it would be tight ends. But as Jim said a few weeks ago, that's more of a narrative rather than the fact that they allow points to tight ends. It just doesn't happen. Now, this week against Tennessee, especially with Hunter Henry out, 3,000 on DraftKings for Gates looks almost like a steal to me. And he's going to go under own because of everybody on Rudolph. So that's for sure. Recapping tight ends real quick. We all like that Kyle Rudolph play. Jim mentioned Greg Olsen made a great case for him. And, of course, Antonio Gates. And Adam also likes Travis Kelce. So now my favorite part of the show, guys, bold calls. I'm going to start it off here because I think I have two that are probably too bold. My first one, Tim Hightower is a top 5 back.
Woo!
Not in terms of dollar per point. I think he has a top 5 fantasy point day at running back. So basically that means I really like him in cash, really like him in GPPs. I just don't think Ingram's going to get the ball. I know a lot of people will think he's still the starting back. Maybe he'll get redemption. Just do not think that's going to be the case. My other bold call here, Amari Cooper is going to have less than 3 catches. Not exactly 3, not 4, not 5. I think he has 2 catches. The guy struggles a lot against number 1 corners, and he sees one of the best in the NFL this week. So I just don't see him being an excellent play this week at all. I'm fading him completely under 3 catches. Jim, let's go to you. Bold calls. What do you think?
Bold calls. All right, I'm going to go with Devontae Booker is the number 1 running back this week. I just think
RB1, I like it.
I think it's the week where he puts it all together. I know Zeke is obviously a candidate, but that's why I think he vaults ahead of him. I'm guessing 2 touchdowns is part of that process, and he's going to be part of the Millie Maker. Hopefully it's me, but the Millie Maker lineup. And then for a bad call, I'm actually going to say, I think Andrew Luck struggles here in this game. Again, the pressure rate. The Packers are top. I think they're 8th or 9th in pressure rate. They really like to get to the pocket. I mean, who doesn't? But they're good at it. And then Luck's been under siege. I just think it's not a great setup on the road in a loud stadium. I think they can get down. So what I'll say about him is I think Luck is outside the top 10 in DraftKings points, which is actually bold when you consider there's 6 teams out.
Exactly. There's definitely bold, and I kind of want you to be right, and I kind of don't want you to be right. It depends how my lineup shake out. But, Adam, what about you? Your bold calls for this week.
So, for my good bold call, I'll say Tyrell Williams of the Chargers is a top 12 receiver this week. Practice report just came out for the Chargers. Both he and Travis Benjamin practice again, so they're both expected to play. But he's been running more routes than Travis Benjamin anyway. Clearly the more explosive player. And like I said, the Titans have allowed the most 20-yard passing plays in the league. I think there's a lot of passing in this game for the Chargers offense. So I like Tyrell Williams a lot. He's only $5,000 on DraftKings. And then for my bad bold call, this is a tough one because I was originally looking at one of the Saints receivers, but I think they're all in good spots despite not knowing which one it is. So I'm going to go to the running back position, and I will say that Jay Ajayi does not run for 200 yards. No, that doesn't count, right?
Yeah.
No.
100.
What?
Is he top 100?
No, I think that's what I was going to get at. I don't think he goes for more than 80. I don't know if that's bold, but like the Jets' run defense has been like incredible this year, and they've played incredible players. I talked about this. They played against David Johnson. They played against Shady. They played against Le'Veon. They played against Spencer Ware. They played against a lot of really good backs and really haven't gotten torched, at least on the ground. So, and I'm not sure if we're quite there with Ajayi yet, where he's an all-purpose back like Le'Veon and David Johnson produced against this defense. So, I think he's interesting in tournaments because if he's like this next great running back, then you're obviously going to want a piece of him. But he's not. It's going to be a 3rd straight week where I don't have any of them, and I'm terrified. But we'll see.
I like
pretty much. Go ahead, Jim. What were you going to say?
I like it. It's bold. I think that is bold, especially a guy who's on this historic run. Like I think it's bold.
I mean, he's literally had about 9 million yards in the last 2 weeks, so it's got to be bold.
Yeah,
I like that. So basically, what you found out is going to happen is Jai's going to have 400 yards. Hightower's going to get no catches. Cooper's going to have 26 catches.
Luck's going to have 6 touchdowns. Yeah.
So all right, that basically wraps up RC Live for Week 9 NFL DFS. Let's just touch on some things that you can take a look at RotoCurve.com before the season start or before the week starts on Sunday. We have Week 9 ownership percentages. We just mentioned a lot of these on the show. You can see that on RotoCurve.com. We have a post posted. So you can see all the ownership percentages to help you make GPP lineups. We also have a bunch of statistics in our databases where you can see red zone stats, all the snaps, targets, red zone carries, red zone receptions, touch rate, target rate, everything you could possibly think of to help you make your lineups in NFL DFS. We also have a cheat sheet from DFS pro Brian Healy, who shipped two, not one, but two qualifiers last week. He's heading to the Playboy Mansion, and he's also heading to the WFFC Championship, which is going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully he wins a lot of money there. Good luck, Brian. I can't wait to see a cheat sheet again this week. We also have Adam and Jim with a fantastic, I want to say trio, but that's for Adam, but a 4 pieces between the two of them. Jim does one of my favorite articles each week, Rosters Market Watch, where he touches on his favorite plays based on rosters pricing. Adam has his cash plays, his bargain plays, his GPP plays. Every play that you think he's going to play this week, he has in those articles, so be sure to take advantage of that. Now, if you want to try all this stuff, maybe you haven't been to RotoCurve.com yet. Don't worry. We have a Week 9 NFL free trial. So be sure to go over there, check that out. If you haven't been to the site yet, it's a great way to take advantage of it and get this information you have for free for 1 week. We also have an NBA free roll-up, so be sure to take advantage of that. If you play some NBA DFS, put that bankroll a little bit. Now, this has been RotoCurve Live for Week 9, presented, as always, by Rosters.com. I'm Josh Kalachi. That's Jim McCormick and Adam Pfeiffer. Good luck this week. Let's win some buckies.